I'm Natalie Foster, 35, and I'd spent months planning this family dinner at a lakeside restaurant in Seattle, believing it could finally make my family see my worth. I'd fought through years of failed designs to build a fashion brand now praised in national magazines. That night, I unveiled my surprise business class tickets to Paris, for each of them a gesture I hoped would bridge the gap between us. My brother laughed, flicking his ticket across the table like it was worthless. "What's this, Natalie?" "Trying to buy our approval," he said, his voice cutting through the room's hum. My dad leaned forward, his smirk sharp. "You'll always be second to your brother," he declared loud enough for nearby tables to turn. My mom sat silent, twisting her napkin, her eyes glued to the table. Their words stung, each one a reminder of years spent chasing their respect. I clenched my jaw, forcing a tight smile. "I hear you," I said, my voice steady but cold. I stood in my chair, scraping loudly, and walked out, their chuckles echoing behind me. In the parking lot, my phone buzzed with a text from my brother niece. "Try Natalie. Keep dreaming." That moment lit a fire in me they'd regret dismissing me. Weeks later, their desperate calls flooded my phone, but I'd already made my move. What would you do if your family crushed your dreams? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you'd choose. As I drove away from that Seattle restaurant, my brother's text, "Niece, try Natalie. Keep dreaming," burned in my mind. It wasn't just his words that stung. It was the years of dismissal they echoed. My childhood in our quiet Seattle suburb was a constant reminder that I'd never measure up. My brother Daniel, 3 years older, was the golden child. His charm and quick wit lit up our house, while I faded into the background. When I was 8, I spent weeks sketching dresses in my notebook, dreaming of runways and boutiques. I showed one to my dad, my hands trembling with excitement. He barely glanced at it. Daniel's math award got him into a gifted program, he said, passing the potatoes at dinner. Daniel grinned, tossing his hair. "Stick to something practical, Natalie," he teased. My mom stayed quiet, her eyes on her plate, letting their words settle over me. I learned to keep my dreams small, tucked away where they couldn't be mocked. In middle school, I poured my heart into a sewing project for a school fair. I stayed up late stitching a dress by hand, each seam a step toward something bigger. It won second place, a small ribbon I clutched proudly. At home, my dad didn't look up from his paper. "Daniel's debate team took first," he said. My mom nodded, refilling her coffee. Daniel leaned over, smirking. "Not everyone's cut out for the spotlight," he said. I swallowed hard, my throat tight, but I didn't argue. That night, I promised myself I'd prove them wrong, not with words, but with something they couldn't ignore. High school didn't change much. Daniel led the student council, his confidence filling every room. I found refuge in the art room, sketching designs on old computers, teaching myself software to bring my ideas to life. My dad called it playing around, saying it wouldn't lead anywhere. My mom asked if I was keeping my grades up. I kept at it late nights, turning sketches into patterns, building a portfolio that felt like my own world. By senior year, I'd sold a few custom dresses to classmates, earning enough to buy my own sewing machine. Daniel got a full-ride scholarship to a top college for finance. My dad clapped his back. "That's my boy," he said, his voice warm. I got a nod and a "don't strain yourself, Natalie." At 20, I moved out, renting a tiny apartment in Seattle to chase my fashion dreams. My first collection flopped, bad fabrics, worse timing. I lost every penny I'd saved. I called home, voice shaky, hoping for support. My dad sighed. "Daniel's interning at a bank," he said, then hung up. My mom sent a text focused on something stable. Daniel didn't bother replying. Their dismissal fueled me. I took night classes in design, worked retail to pay rent, and rebuilt my designs from scratch. I studied trends, learned to source better materials, and spent hours perfecting every stitch. By 25, I launched a small online store selling unique dresses that caught local attention. A boutique picked up my line, then another. My dad still called it a hobby. Daniel's new job at a finance firm was all they talked about at family dinners. The failures weren't easy. My second collection tanked when a supplier bailed, leaving me with unsellable stock and a maxed out credit card. I cried alone in my apartment, but I didn't quit. I took freelance gigs designing for local events, saving every dollar to try again. By 28, my designs were in Seattle shops earning praise from customers. A national magazine featured my work, calling it fresh and bold. I mailed a copy to my parents, hoping for a reaction. My dad called to talk about Daniel's promotion. My mom sent a card with no note. Daniel laughed it off at a family barbecue. Magazines, cute Natalie, he said, grabbing a drink. Each rejection pushed me harder. I stayed up nights refining my craft, learning marketing, building a brand from nothing. By 30, my designs were in national stores, my name in industry articles. Strangers praised my work, but my family never asked about it. At holiday gatherings, my dad quizzed Daniel about his stock portfolios, his corner office. My mom nodded, passing the turkey. I sat there, my achievements buried under their chatter. Once I mentioned a sold-out show in Seattle. Daniel smirked. What for dresses? My dad chuckled and my mom looked away. I stopped sharing. Years of their slights stacked up, each one a reminder that Daniel's life was the focus, mine an afterthought. Every milestone, a new collection, a sold-out show, was a quiet rebellion against their doubts. But deep down, I still craved their approval, a sign they saw me. That's why I planned that dinner, those Paris tickets, hoping something big would finally make them look at me differently. Their laughter that night wasn't new, but it cut deeper, a wound I couldn't ignore anymore. By my late 20s, I'd turned my passion for fashion into something undeniable. After years of scraping by, my online store exploded with boutiques across Seattle carrying my dresses. A national fashion magazine called my latest collection a bold new voice, and soon my designs were in stores from Portland to Chicago. At 30, I founded Foster Designs, my own brand, and moved into a sleek Seattle loft, a far cry from the cramped apartment I'd started in. My name started popping up in industry blogs, and I spoke at design conferences, sharing stages with designers I'd once idolized. Customers flooded my inbox with praise, calling my work innovative and fresh, but my family, they didn't bat an eye. I'd call home voice bright, hoping to share my wins. Once I told my dad about a feature in a top fashion journal. That's nice, he said, his tone flat, but Daniel just closed $1 million deal at his firm. He launched into my brother's latest triumph, some high-stakes investment that had his bosses raving. My mom murmured, good for you, then asked if I was eating enough. Daniel didn't even pick up when I called. Their indifference stung, a sharp reminder of the years I'd spent chasing their approval. I kept pushing every late night at my sewing machine, every pitch to a new retailer, a quiet defiance of their doubts. At 32, I landed a contract with a major department store chain. My dresses sold out online in hours, and fashion critics called me a rising star. I flew to New York for a gala, rubbing shoulders with industry giants. I mailed my parents an invite, picturing them beaming with pride. My dad texted back, busy. Daniel speaking at a finance summit. My mom didn't reply. Daniel sent a one-word text, cool. I stared at my phone, the sting of their dismissal sharper than ever. They still saw the girl whose first collection flopped, not the woman whose designs were setting trends across the country. Family gatherings were no different. At a cousin's wedding in Seattle, my dad cornered Daniel to talk about his new office with a view. My mom nodded along, refilling her wine. I mentioned a design award I'd won, my voice steady despite the nerves. Daniel smirked. What for stitching? He said loud enough for relatives to glance over. My dad laughed, slapping his back. My mom looked at her shoes. I forced a smile and changed the subject, but inside I was done begging for their attention. Their rejection only fueled me. By 34, Foster Designs was a household name in the fashion world, with a flagship store opening in downtown Seattle. I'd built an empire from nothing, funding it with my own grit and countless late-night sketches. A national retailer picked up my spring collection, and customers lined up for the launch. Industry leaders called me a trailblazer, and I mentored young designers giving talks at local colleges. But my family never visited the store, never asked about my work. At a Thanksgiving dinner, my dad toasted Daniel's latest bonus, his pride loud and clear. My mom clinked her glass, smiling faintly. I sat there, my sold-out collection, a silent victory they'd never acknowledge. That's when I decided to plan the dinner. I wanted one last shot to make them see me. Not the quiet girl they dismissed, but the woman who'd conquered her failures. I booked a private room at a lakeside restaurant in Seattle. Its modern elegance, the perfect stage for what I hoped would be a turning point. For weeks, I obsessed over every detail, the menu, the lighting, the timing of my surprise. I spent thousands on business class tickets to Paris, one for each of them tucked into sleek envelopes. I pictured my dad's rare nod of approval. Maybe, you've done well, Natalie. I imagined Daniel's smirk fading, my mom finally speaking up with pride. I wasn't naive. I knew their history of brushing me off from my childhood sketches to my sold-out shows. But I thought something grand might break through their indifference. My whole life I'd chased their validation, believing a big enough gesture could change their view. The tickets were my final play, a chance to prove I wasn't second to Daniel. I rehearsed my speech, my hands steady, as I sealed the envelopes. I even called my friend Ryan, who'd always believed in my work, to run through the plan. He listened patiently, his voice calm. "They don't deserve you, Natalie," he said, but I brushed it off. Deep down, I hoped they'd look at me and see the woman I'd become, not the shadow they'd always ignored. That dinner, I thought, would be the moment everything changed. The night of the dinner arrived, my nerves buzzing like static, as I stepped into the private room of the lakeside restaurant in Seattle. I'd spent weeks perfecting every detail, from the crisp tablecloths to the soft jazz setting the mood. My family, my dad, my mom, and Daniel sat around the table, their faces a mix of boredom and expectation. I'd poured thousands into business class tickets to Paris, each one tucked into a sleek envelope, my final attempt to make them see the woman I'd become. My heart pounded, but I kept my smile steady, clinging to the hope that this night would change everything. As the waiter served the appetizers, I cleared my throat, my hands steady, despite the knot in my stomach. "I have something for you," all I said, sliding the envelopes across the table. "A trip to Paris, all expenses paid." I watched their faces, expecting a flicker of awe, maybe gratitude. Daniel moved first, tearing open his envelope with a smirk. He glanced at the ticket and let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "What's this, Natalie?" "Trying to buy our approval with your little fashion money," he said, tossing the ticket onto his plate. The paper hit his untouched salad, crinkling loudly, the sound cutting through the room's hum. My dad leaned forward, his smirk sharper than a blade. "You'll always be second to your brother, Natalie," he said, his voice booming, drawing glances from a couple at a nearby table. "Daniel's deals are what keep this family proud." My mom sat silent, her fingers twisting her napkin into a tight knot, her eyes glued to the tablecloth. Not a single word in my defense. Her silence stung worse than their mockery, a betrayal that twisted like a knife in my chest. I'd built Foster designs from nothing, landed national retailers, earned praise from industry giants, but to them, I was still the girl they'd dismissed since childhood. The room felt smaller, their words a heavy weight pressing down on me. Daniel's smirk widened, his fork tapping the table rhythmically, waiting for me to break. My dad sipped his wine, his eyes glinting with amusement, as if my pain was a game they'd played 1,000 times. My mom's refusal to meet my gaze was a wall I'd never breach. I'd poured my heart into this night, into those tickets, believing a grand gesture could finally make them see me. Their laughter shattered that hope, each chuckle a reminder of every slight, every ignored milestone crashing into this one moment. My hands trembled under the table, my face burning, but I refused to let them see me crack. I'd spent my life chasing their approval, from childhood sketches to sold-out collections, thinking this dinner could rewrite our story. I was wrong. Their words weren't just cruel, they were a declaration that I'd never be enough. I thought of Ryan's words from weeks ago. They don't deserve you, Natalie. He'd seen what I couldn't, and now standing in their laughter, I finally understood. I pushed my chair back the scrape against the polished floor, slicing through their chuckles. I hear you, I said, my voice cold as steel steady despite the storm inside. I stood my heels clicking sharply on the wood and walked out. The cool Seattle air hit my face, but I didn't look back. Their laughter echoed behind me, but it no longer held power. In that moment, something snapped. I wasn't the girl they could dismiss anymore. I was done bending over backward for their approval. In my sedan, parked by the lake, my phone lit up with a text from Daniel Nice. Try Natalie. Keep dreaming. I stared at the screen, my jaw clenched tight. That was it, the final straw. I'd spent years proving myself, building an empire they refused to see. No more. I dialed Ryan, my hands steady now, my resolve unshakable. They laughed. I told him, my voice firm, no trace of tears. I'm done with them. He didn't hesitate. Good. You're worth more than their games. He said, his voice warm, grounding me like an anchor. That night, as I drove through Seattle's quiet streets, a fire lit inside me. They'd mocked my dreams one too many times, and I'd make sure they regretted it. Their words at that dinner weren't just a slight, they were a challenge, and I was ready to answer. The next morning, I called my lawyer, my voice calm but unyielding. Start the process, I said. It's time. I didn't know exactly what I'd do yet, but I knew one thing they'd learn. What happens when you underestimate someone like me? The morning after that disastrous dinner, I sat in my Seattle loft, the city skyline sharp against the dawn. My lawyer's number was already on my phone. Sell the store, I told her, my voice steady, no hint of hesitation. The boutique in our family's old suburb, a gift from my grandfather's will, was mine to control, his one legacy that didn't come with strings. I'd kept it running for years, a quaint shop filled with memories of him, its shelves stocked with local crafts. But after that night, it felt like a chain tying me to a family that didn't value me. By noon, a developer offered $2 million cash for the property. I signed the papers, the deal sealed, and the locks were changed by evening. A weight lifted, but I wasn't done. 3 days later, my dad's call came, his voice trembling with rage. What have you done? Natalie, he shouted. That store was our family's heart, our history. I held the phone away, his words a faint echo of the dismissal I'd endured my whole life. It was mine, I said coolly, then hung up. Daniel's text followed, sharp and bitter. You're tearing us apart, Natalie. You'll pay for this. I stared at the screen, my jaw tight, and deleted it without replying. They thought they could guilt me into backing down, but I was done being their doormat. I met Ryan at a downtown Seattle cafe the next day, the hum of espresso machines filling the air. He'd always been my rock, the one who saw my worth when my family didn't. I told him everything, the dinner, the Paris tickets, their mocking laughter. His jaw tightened as I spoke, his eyes narrowing. You've been carrying them for years, haven't you? He said, leaning forward. I nodded, thinking of the family fund I'd set up after my first big collection sold. I'd poured millions into it, money from my designs for emergencies, for Daniel's kids' college, for my parents' medical bills. Have you checked the fund lately? Ryan asked, his voice low. Daniel's been spending big new house, fancy trips, a private school for his kids. My stomach dropped, a cold wave washing over me. I'd trusted Daniel to manage the fund, believing his finance background made him reliable. The idea that he'd been dipping into it felt like another betrayal, but it wasn't a shock. Ryan offered to dig into the records, his tech skills sharp from years in data analysis. Let's find out what's going on, he said, squeezing my hand. I nodded, a fire igniting inside me. Selling the store was just the beginning. 2 weeks later, we sat in Ryan's apartment, his laptop screen glowing with the numbers that made my blood run cold. Daniel had siphoned off $500,000 from the fund, funneling it into a risky investment, a startup he'd pitched to his firm's clients but got rejected. He'd used my money to bankroll his gamble, a flashy app promising instant returns that crashed within months. The fund meant to secure my parents' future, and his kids' education was nearly drained, barely a million left. He didn't even ask. I whispered, my hands clenched, my voice shaking with fury. Ryan's eyes were steady. He thought you'd never notice, he said. He's been counting on your silence. The betrayal cut deeper than their laughter at the dinner. Daniel had always acted entitled, as if my success was his to claim. I trusted him with my money, my hard-earned fortune from Foster Designs, and he'd thrown it away on a failed dream. I made a decision then and there. I'm done protecting him. I told Ryan, my voice firm. He nodded, his hand on my shoulder. Let's make it public, he said. He knew a reporter at a local business journal, someone who'd jump at a story about financial misconduct. I gave him the green light, my resolve unshakable. Within days, Ryan's contact had the records, every transaction, every dollar Daniel had misused. The story broke in a Seattle business blog, not naming me, but hinting at a family fund mismanaged by a prominent financier. Daniel's name was tied to the failed startup, his reputation in the finance world teetering. Colleagues whispered over coffee, his clients pulling back, questioning his ethics. I didn't start the investigation that followed, but I didn't stop it either. The state's Financial Oversight Board launched a formal inquiry into his dealings, their questions sharp and unrelenting. My dad called again, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. You're ruining us, Natalie, he said. First the store, now this fix-it. I let the call go to voicemail, his accusations fading into static. My mom showed up at my loft a week later, her coat buttoned tight against the autumn chill. She sat on my couch, clutching her purse, avoiding my eyes. We're hurt, Natalie, she said softly. Why didn't you talk to us first? Her voice was gentle, but there was no apology, no acknowledgement of the years they dismissed me. I waited for more, for a hint of regret, but she stood and left her silence louder than ever. Daniel tried calling, his messages piling up. You're destroying my career. He texted, his words dripping with panic. I didn't respond. Ryan met me at my office the next evening, papers spread across my desk. You're doing the right thing, he said, his voice firm. They've taken enough from you. His support was a lifeline, a stark contrast to my family's betrayal. The store was gone. Daniel's career was unraveling, and I felt no guilt, only a grim satisfaction. They'd mocked me for years, called me second best, but I was done living in their shadow. I'd taken the first step, and there was no turning back. The fallout came faster than I expected. The Seattle business blog story about Daniel's mismanagement spread like wildfire, and within days his name was plastered across local finance circles. The state's Financial Oversight Board dug deeper, uncovering more than the $500,000 he'd siphoned from the family fund. They found payments for a leased sports car, a lavish Aspen vacation, a down payment on a second home, even private school fees for his kids. His firm issued a statement distancing itself, and whispers of his resignation turned into reality. Colleagues who once toasted his success now avoided him, their whispers sharp over conference calls. Major clients canceled contracts citing breached trust. Daniel's carefully crafted image as a savvy financier lay in ruins, his career a shadow of what it once was. I didn't reach out. He'd built his empire on my money, and now it was collapsing under the weight of his own greed. My parents faced a harsher reckoning. The sale of my grandfather's store left them reeling, their pride in the family's so-called legacy shattered. Relatives once drawn to their charm began asking questions. My cousin Sarah called, her voice uneasy. Is it true about Daniel's spending? She asked, her tone laced with doubt. I kept my answers short, letting the truth speak for itself. Aunts and uncles started eyeing my dad and Daniel with suspicion, their once warm family gatherings growing cold. My mom, always silent, stopped defending Daniel at reunions. Her absence of words a new kind of betrayal. The family's unity, fragile from the start, cracked under the weight of Daniel's deceit and my parents' complicity. I felt a dull ache, not for their downfall, but for the bonds I'd once hoped to mend. Their rejection had shaped me for too long, but I refused to let it pull me back. I met Ryan at a lakeside cafe, the water shimmering under the late September sun. He'd been my anchor through every step, his belief in me unwavering when my family's wasn't. They're paying for their choices, he said, stirring his coffee, his eyes steady. You don't owe them anything. His words grounded me, a reminder that I'd built my life without their approval. I told him about my mom's visit, her soft plea with no apology, her eyes avoiding mine. Ryan's gaze softened, his voice firm. You're stronger than their silence, Natalie, he said. I nodded, feeling the weight of their betrayal lift, replaced by a quiet resolve to move forward. My company, Foster Designs, was soaring. New contracts poured in from retailers across the country, and my fall collection sold out in days. Industry blogs called it my boldest work yet, and I started mentoring young designers, their ambition a mirror of my own at their age. Ryan joined me at a launch event, his presence a comfort amid the chaos of my family's collapse. You're building something real, he said, his hand brushing mine, a spark in his eyes I hadn't noticed before. His support was a light in the storm, a stark contrast to the family who dismissed me for years. One crisp October evening, an email shifted my perspective. It came from my grandfather Thomas's lawyer, a name I hadn't heard since settling his estate years ago. Attached was a scanned letter in his familiar slanted handwriting, dated weeks before his death. Natalie, it began, you've always had a spark no one could dim. Don't let their doubts define you. Build your life your way and let your heart guide you. He wrote of his pride in my drive, my resilience, qualities my family never acknowledged. Tears blurred my vision as I read the Seattle skyline glowing outside my loft. Thomas had seen me when no one else did, his words, a hand reaching through time, steadying me in a way I hadn't expected. Daniel's downfall deepened. The investigation uncovered more than his failed startup. Auditors found he'd funneled funds to cover personal debts, designer suits, a private club membership, even a yacht rental for a client party. His firm let him go, and a local news outlet ran a story tying his financial misconduct to the blog's report. His reputation, once his pride was shattered, his name blacklisted in Seattle's finance world. I watched from afar, feeling neither joy nor regret, only closure. He'd mocked my dreams for years, and now his own choices had buried him. My parents' world unraveled further. Relatives whispered about their greed, their failure to rein in Daniel. Family dinners, once loud with their charm, grew sparse with aunts and uncles choosing distance over drama. My dad and mom took out a loan to cover mounting expenses, their lifestyle crumbling without the family fund or the store's symbolic weight. I heard through Sarah that they'd stopped hosting their annual holiday party, their social standing a shadow of what it was. My mom's silence, once a wound, was now just a fact, like the autumn chill outside my window. I didn't reach out. Their world built on pride and dismissal had collapsed, and I no longer felt the need to fix it. Ryan and I met at my office one evening, sketching out plans for my next collection. His support was unwavering, his belief in me, a foundation I hadn't known I needed. As we worked, his hand lingered on mine, his smile carrying a warmth that felt new deeper. I realized I'd spent years proving myself to the wrong people. Daniel's ruined my parents' isolation. It all confirmed what I'd known since that dinner. I didn't need their approval. I had my own. Thomas's letter sealed that truth, its words, a quiet mantra guiding me forward. My family's rejection was their failure, not mine, and I was ready to step fully into my own light. Winter settled over Seattle, and with it came a clarity I'd never felt before. I cut all ties with my family, not out of anger, but out of a quiet certainty that I no longer needed their validation. My dad, my mom, and Daniel were out of my life. No calls, no visits, no holiday cards. I blocked their numbers, deleted their messages, and let go of the hope I'd clung to for years. I heard through a cousin that my parents were struggling, their finances crumbling under a loan they'd taken to prop up their fading lifestyle. Daniel faced a formal charge for financial misconduct, his savings drained by legal fees, and a court order to repay the $500,000 he'd taken from the fund. Family gatherings stopped, including them relatives choosing distance over their drama. Their world had unraveled a consequence of their own making, and I felt no urge to fix it. I'd found my own light. Ryan and I grew closer, our bond, shifting from friendship to a love I hadn't seen coming. One snowy evening, he took me to a small cafe in Seattle's North End, its windows glowing with string lights. He was quieter than usual, his hand fidgeting in his pocket. As we sat by the window, snowflakes dancing outside, he slid a small box across the table. "Natalie," he said, his voice soft but steady, "you're my home. Will you marry me?" My heart raced, not from fear, but from a joy I hadn't known I could feel. "Yes," I said, my voice breaking, and he slipped a simple diamond ring onto my finger. The cafe's patrons clapped, their smiles warm, a stark contrast to the coldness of my family's dinner table. We lingered, laughing over coffee, his hand in mine, the future bright for the first time. For the first time, I felt truly seen, not for my designs or my success, but for who I was. Ryan had been there through every storm, his belief in me, a foundation stronger than anything my family could offer. We planned a small wedding set for a Seattle chapel, glowing with candlelight, filled with friends and colleagues who'd become my chosen family. My parents and Daniel weren't invited. Their absence didn't ache as it once might have. I'd made peace with their silence, their choices no longer mine to carry. Ryan and I spent evenings sketching out our future, from our honeymoon in Italy to a shared home in Seattle's hills, each plan a step toward a life built on love, not approval. My company, Foster Designs, continued to soar. I launched a foundation in my grandfather Thomas's name, funding young women in Seattle to chase their dreams in fashion. At the foundation's first gala, held in a Seattle hotel ballroom, I watched a 19-year-old pitch her clothing line to investors, her eyes bright with ambition. She reminded me of myself, stitching late into the night, defying doubts. I'd given her a grant to start her brand, just as Thomas's belief had carried me. His legacy lived in her, not in the store I'd sold or the family I left behind. The work filled me with purpose, a reminder that my worth wasn't tied to those who dismissed me. Through it all, I'd learned a truth that changed everything. I spent years chasing my family's approval, tying my value to their praise, believing their laughter defined me. But their rejection was a mirror of their own flaws, not mine. My success, Foster Designs, my foundation. My love with Ryan was mine, built on my terms. Thomas's letter had sealed that truth, but it was my journey that proved it. You don't need someone else's light to shine. Your worth is in the life you build, the dreams you chase, the strength you find within. To anyone listening, let this be a warning. Don't let others define your value. Not your family, not your friends, not the world. Live for yourself, for the spark inside you, and don't let anyone dim it. I spent too long trying to prove I was enough, but I know now I always was. My family's laughter, their betrayal, their downfall, they were their failures, not mine. I chose myself, and that choice set me free. You can choose yourself too, no matter how loud the doubts around you grow. Thank you for listening to my story. It's been a long road, and sharing it means more than you know. If it resonated with you, please subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, how would you choose yourself in a world that tries to hold you back?